Hi, now we're going to talk about methodologies. What is a methodology? A methodology is a set of guidelines or principles that can be tailored and applied to a specific situation. In a project, these guidelines might be a list of things to do. A methodology could also be a specific approach. It could be templates, forms, and even checklists used over the project lifecycle. A project lifecycle also depends on what your project is, but it starts upon gathering requirements from the end users, designing the system, implementing the system, training the end users for the system, handoff of the system from the experimental mode to the end users, and then final when you turn on the system and it goes live. That's in a computer system, but most projects are along the same lines. It goes from gathering requirements to turning it on and letting end users use it. Um, Defining a project. This totally depends on what your industry is, what your project is, what you're trying to accomplish, and what are your objectives. And as I mentioned before, it really depends on three major things: time, funding, and people. A project, it has a hard start date and it has an end date. A project can't be something that just continues on because you're building something, you're creating something. So there has to be a date where you say, okay, it's finished. It also has a schedule. It has costs and it has quality constraints. It contains risk because you're spending money and you want the system to work. I will throw in some interesting history here. In the Systems Development Lifecycle, the SDLC, Systems Development Lifecycle, there actually is a place in projects or programs where you had a good idea, you gathered the requirements, you designed the system to meet the requirements, you started building the system, and then as you find out as you're building it, it does not meet the user's needs. And even though you have already spent money on this project, there is a time within a project plan that you can say, okay, we've tried everything we know how to do, we've spent money already, but this is not going to accomplish what the end users need it to accomplish, so we need to stop the project. So just understand too, that most of us want successful completions of our projects. But there is a point in time, and it's not very often because hopefully you'll ask all these questions and you'll get the risks mitigated before you start the project. But there are times in the project management systems development lifecycle when you've spent money, you've done good things, but it will not meet the needs of the users. So there are times when you have to say stop and end the project without a successful completion. Again, those are rare, and some of the ways we can keep those from happening are to be in the risk management plan to identify all the risks and try to do everything you can to answer all the questions about those risks before you ever spend a penny, before you ever buy any equipment, before you ever start putting things together. You ask yourself certain key questions, and these questions are going to totally depend on what is your industry, what is your product, what is the service, what are you trying to accomplish, and how are you trying to accomplish that. So parts of a project, and that is part of a project, parts of the project are it has a start and an end date, it has schedule, cost, and quality constraints, it has time, funding, and human restraints. It contains risk. It has a certain scope that needs to occur. In other words, it'll only go for this far. And some examples are the development of a new freeway, the creation of a new business unit in an organization, the design and development of a new computer system, which is what I'm mostly familiar with, search for a pharmaceutical drug or life-threatening virus, the development of a naval or spaceship, the creation of a new political party. These are just some of the ideas to show you how varied they can be. It can be anywhere from space to chemicals to Navy to business units to contract, civil construction, civil engineering, and it can be aerospace engineering and modifying airplanes and doing anything. And it can even be in politics. So a project plan can be in any environment that we know of. Looking at project plans, you have objectives, you have responsibility, and you have how to accomplish the task. Those are three ways to break down your objectives. And then you design those. Do you have responsibilities of project management? One of the things I mentioned before is that you document. Project managers should document everything that happens within the project plan all the way from the beginning. And that's why I said when I sit there and have a meeting with everybody at the table at the beginning, I like to go ahead and say, okay, these are the items that we've discussed, list the detail, and then have everybody agree, okay, these are the outcomes we want from this project. These are the costs we have at this time of the project. And if you don't have costs, that's fine. When you have your first meeting and you say, okay, this is what we'd like to do, because evidently someone higher up the food chain than you has said we want this project and you're going to lead it. So there's already some kind of idea what they want. So write down these objectives, write down what the end user requirements that you know of are, and then a simple plan about how we expect to go about these, and then have everyone sign it and say, this is what we agree to. And like I said, each time and each project, this will, certain aspects will be different. That's why there is no one single project methodology or there is no one project plan template because everything is always different. It depends where you're working. Are you in the telecom industry? Are you in the computer industry? Are you in the call center industry? Are you building airplanes? Are you building cars? Are you building roads? Each of these different objectives require different line items in the project, and it will make it either simpler or more complex. So I've had the question asked on the message board, is there a simple project plan or template? No, there is not, because it all depends on what you're trying to accomplish, where you're trying to accomplish it, and what financing, time, and people you have available. So now that this is perfectly clear, you really have to take everything from the environment in which you're given. You have to look at the project, you have to monitor the costs. As a project manager, your main responsibility is to take what you've been given and make sure it happens to the best of your ability. And that means addressing issues, creating a risk log, a risk table to say, okay, these are the risks that will happen. And you will not be thrown into a project all by yourself with nobody that's ever done it before, that people have never done it before. You will be in an organization that has people that have been doing this for 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. And those are the people you say, okay, what do you think needs to be done to make this project happen? What's the first thing that needs to happen? What's the second thing that needs to happen? Inside the requirements gathering, what's the first thing? What's the second thing? Inside the design process, what's the first thing? What's the second thing? Oh, by the way, now that I have this line item of what needs to be done, who do you think should do this? And get a name or names of people that need to do that line item on the project. And then you say, well, what do you think this part is going to cost? And if it depends, like if they're building a piece of a road, well, okay, the equipment we've got uses this much, takes this much money to create 100 meters of concrete, so this is going to cost this much. You find out these things from people who are experienced. It also helps if in your organization there have been prior projects before you. You take one of those projects and use it as a template to say, okay, this project, we did this, 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 and this. The project I'm doing is very similar to that. It's evidently in the same industry because it's in the same company that you're working for. So try to find something in your company, in the group that you're working with, that's already been done and use that as a template. You may have to change line items. You may have to change length of time that those line items take to accomplish. You will definitely change names and rates, but you'll have a template to go by. So does the book provide templates that you can use for everything? No, it does not. Does it provide a lot of templates? Yes, it does. But the key is, at your organization, find a project plan that they have done in the past and use that as your template. It is your job as a project manager to make sure that the project comes in at or under budget so that it doesn't cost more. Budget is how much funding you've got. At or below time, so if you've got 7 months to do the project, it comes in under 7 months or at 7 months, but not past. And if there's certain costs, you have to keep it within those costs. But you're not a magician. The costs are directly comparative to what it takes to finish the project. That's why when you do the requirements gathering, you go and you get the design before you start the implementation of the project. Before you buy one bolt or one screw, you go back to the funding people and say, these are the requirements, this is the design, this is how much it costs. Are you willing to fund these costs and wait for this amount of time? And again, if they say no, you negotiate with them and say what part. And then if you have to negotiate, you make sure you write down what was negotiated and what was changed. And then you write up a new paper saying, okay, this is what is required, this is what's changed, these are the costs. And again, you get signatures to say, we agree that this is now the scope of the project. I'll define that term scope for you. The scope of the project is how big is it, what are the requirements, when does it start, and when does it stop. That's the scope. What happens when people do not define everything very well, you get what they call scope creep. It creeps out further and further, so you lose time and you lose money. So that's when a project will come in over budget or overtime, and that does not look good for you as a project manager. So you need to make sure that you get set line items that have to be completed. You have the adequate number of days or hours to complete those steps. You have the adequate amount of financing you need to complete those steps, and then you get signatures. That is the biggest piece of advice I can give you as a project manager or program manager to another project manager. Once everything is defined, you go back to the person that's funding the project and you say, these are the requirements, these are what our people say it's going to take. Do you agree or do you disagree? If you agree, sign your name here. If you disagree, let's negotiate the lines, but we're going to change things. So if it's not with the way you want it, then, if you want to save money, that's fine. But if you save money, you're going to lose some amount of functionality. You're not going to get exactly what you wanted. So also get them to sign that. That is the biggest piece of help I can give you as one PM to another. When you look at the status of projects, okay, once you've created your project plan, now you have to follow it. You've created line items to say, okay, Jimmy is going to do this on this day and it takes him 5 days. And simultaneously, at the same time, Jimmy can do this, Timmy can do that, Janie can do this. So you've got 3 things that are going on simultaneously. And then each of those projects, each one of those line items will take a certain period of time. Then you've also got things that can't happen, like I was talking about software installation. Well, you have to install the hardware first. So when the hardware is being installed, the software can not be installed until the day after, because the hardware has to be installed first. Those are things that have to be done consecutively. One, then another, then another. That's in your project plan. So if you look through your project plan and you see Timmy has 3 line items on the same day, you should understand Timmy can't do 3 things at one time. That you need to change those line items to make sure Timmy has the 8 hours he needs to do this line item, the 10 hours he needs to do this line item, and the other 8 hours to do the other line item. So it's your responsibility as a project manager to make sure that the resources you've been giving and the time amounts you've been given will create the project the way it's wanted. And then small projects versus large projects, complex projects versus easy projects. And by the way, there is no such thing as an easy project. If it was, it wouldn't need a project manager. So that's always something to remember. But you go back on a daily basis and check the status of your project. Do not bother and pester the people doing the work, but just ask about them as you pass through their office or whatever. Just ask them every now and then, how are you accomplishing this task or these tasks? Are you on schedule or are you not? A normal project review meeting is every week. It's normal to have a project review meeting every week. Keep the meeting as short as possible, because the whole goal of a project is to keep the people that you're meeting with working. And if they're sitting at a table eating donuts and talking with you, they're not working. So the entire point of a project manager is to make these review meetings as short as possible and get as most information covered as possible. Another thing about resources is that in many organizations, you as a project manager will not be the supervisor or manager of the people that are part of your project. You will have resources given to you from other sections. So you will not be the person's boss. This could be an issue. So you have to make friends with those people. You have to look out for their best interest and treat them like you would want to be treated. And here's a major part of project management that I have never seen written down, but I will tell you it is the most effective thing in project management that you can do other than documenting everything that you do and the team does. Treat people like you want to be treated. If a person has 2 hours to do a job or do a line item on your project, and they're in an hour and a half of it, don't be sitting over their shoulder going, are you done yet? That's not going to help. What you want to do is treat that person like you want to be treated. You want to contact them and say, when do you think you'll be able to put the 2 hours in on this part of the project? I've got a 3-day span that I need those 2 hours done in. And that's up to you as the project manager to understand what your time frames are and what has to be done and what has to be done in order. So that's how you do it. Another issue is when I had my groups working 3 shifts, one day I would go into first shift. The next day I went in and spent time with the second shift. The next day I went in and spent time with the third shift. So in each day I would spend time with a different shift to show them that, one, I cared about them, I wanted to know what was going on, I was responsible, and I wanted to help them as much as possible. Another attitude that you as a PM should have, I'm not demanding that you have it, but the first attitude you need to have is that you want to take care of your people and you want to treat them like you want to be treated. The second thing is, you would be smart and you would be wise to hear this, is if you try to make their job as easy as possible. I'll give you an example. Part of the IT systems that I was building as part of the corporate level at Motorola were global systems all over the world. And I was not a direct responsible or direct manager of any of the people on my team. So I actually had to win people to say, because we had 10 project managers and we had 3 sysadmins, we had 3 security guys, we had 2 software guys, and they were going in all different directions for multiple projects. So what I did for them is I said, look, here's what I need. This is the time frame I need it in. Can you do it for me? And if they said yes, I said, here's what I'll do. I will go in the system and I will turn off the part of this thing. If the system was live, you'd have to turn off the alarms so it doesn't shut everything down when someone goes in to change some lines in code. So what I told the people to do, I said, look, if you'll do this for me, you tell me when you can do it, and I'll check with you, and then I'll turn off all the security. And then as soon as you're done, you tell me and I'll turn the security back on. And that saved them 5 to 10 minutes of work. So they said, sure, if you do that for me, I'll be glad to do it for you. Another thing, when I had my office meetings or if I had them working overtime, I would work overtime with them. And I was on salary. I did not get paid more, but I would be there with them to show them that I was their leader and that I cared about them. If they worked overtime, I would normally bring donuts or I would do something to show them they were important to me. And when our vendors came in to give us meals or take us to a ball game or something, I made sure that my people that had worked hard for me got the same benefits. I made sure they got taken out to eat. I made sure they got taken to the ball games instead of me. So, I mean, that's the kind of thing. And once you do that, people will work for you. When they see that you care and that you're willing to do different and you're willing to take care of them, not just that you care, but that you'll care for them, they'll work for you. And that's what you need to do as a project manager. So I'm giving you some advice. Remember the golden rule: love others more than you love yourselves, and you'll get a lot more done in project management, and you'll get your project completed under budget and under time a lot of the time because of how you treat people. And that goes far beyond monitoring your projects. So the key in these chapters, is create a project plan. Don't allow scope changes. Treat your people well and monitor your projects on a weekly basis. The different methodologies that are a part of this, you can read these in the books. It's important to know that different methodologies work for different groups and for different projects, for different environments. So it depends on your business, depends on what you're working with. One of the things that helps when you're doing projects is you need to understand your organization. Who's responsible for what? How much timing is there? How much funding is there? If you see a project starting to fall back and not meet your project guidelines and your deadlines, that's when you need to meet with the resources that are available and saying, why are we not meeting our deadlines? And if there's an issue, find out. Maybe they're being pulled off your project for another project that is more important. Well, that's when you go back to your funding, the person that's funding the project, director, vice president, whomever, and say, okay, our resources are being pulled away on this other project. Therefore, our timelines are going to have to be extended because we do not have these people working at this time. You do not let the milestone pass and you fail to meet the milestone without informing the people in advance. What we call transparency and communication is very, very important in project management. And again, this is one of the things that I'm teaching you you're not going to find in the project management books. Transparency just means being open with them. If you're having problems, tell them you're having problems and tell them why you're having problems. And say, we are not going to be able to meet this next guideline or next milestone because of this, this, and this. And these are beyond our control. Because these people are at the director and vice president level, where if they really need the job to get done, they will get the resources assigned to you to get the job done. So don't wait until it's too late. Tell them as far in advance as you can that, hey, this is slipping because these people are being pulled away, and go to the decision makers and say, can you help me with this? I will not meet my milestones if I do not get these people. And a milestone is a major mark on your project plan. On your project plan, you'll normally have 4 or 5 major milestones. You have the end user requirements. So once you've got all the requirements, that's a milestone. Now, once I have all the requirements, I can now design the project. That's a milestone, the end of the design. Once the is designed, then you have the implementation. How do you build it? That's implementation. Okay, during implementation, you've got several different line items, and then you've got a timeline for these. So a major milestone for implementation would be creating a test site, creating, where you can play and see if the software is going to work together. And it's basically how do you get it developed so you can get people trained on it before you turn it on and make it go live. So you usually in computer systems you usually build 3 or 4 environments that as you're building the system. So that's a milestone. Do I get the sand pit? That's a milestone. Do I get the test area, sandbox? That's a milestone. So there's several milestones in there, and a milestone is a major event in the project, and that's usually concerned with time and money. So mark your major milestones, and if you see or even think that you're not going to meet it, don't be silent. Go back to the decision makers and say, I don't think we're going to meet it, and here's why. So again, 2 big things for me are: one, treat people well like you would want to be treated, treat them with respect. The second thing is show them that you're there with them. Show them that you have authority and that you're willing to work overtime with them. You're willing to bring them donuts. You're willing to do things for them, that you're not just demanding they do things for you. And then open, transparent communication. That's a major, major factor. Okay, and that's part of understanding your organization. Why do projects fail? Well, they fail for a million reasons, and most of them are poor leadership. So now we're going to go into project 2, methodology, some of the explanations. Notice that one of the words they use is life cycle. There's a life cycle. It depends on the market sector. It depends on the product. So in other words, how long does it take to build whatever you're trying to build? That's the life cycle. What market sector are you working in? What are you trying to accomplish? What is the product? What is the size? What kind of technology is needed? What's the situation within your company? Is it a financial block of software that has to be done by the end of year so you can get it taken for your taxes and so it can do all the end of year accounting? Those things are very, very, very important. Now, it talks about here a nuclear plant or space shuttle, so there's life cycle is also part of quality, and that's built into that, and it depends on the concept, development, support, etc. But you can read these things. Now, there's a general project methodology phases. You've got the concept phase, analysis phase, planning phase, and you can go through these, and these are figures 2.1, and you can go through those. And the thing to understand is that you go through certain phases in your project. You just write them down on your project plan. As a matter of fact, Microsoft has a software plan called Microsoft Project that you can purchase, and it'll create those for you, and it'll create time charts, Gantt charts, and all these different things so you can see the progress of the people. You can see where there's dependencies, what can be done at one time at the same time, or what has dependencies that has to be done once, then the other, consecutively. And whether you need such software totally depends on the complexity of the project, how long it's going to take, and how much money it's going to take. The main thing that a lot of people are looking for is to make sure you don't go over budget. And the way you're not going to, that you're not going to go over budget at the end of the project is if you're on budget as you go through the project. And that's why you have to go back to your weekly reviews and understand how much money is being spent on the people and on the process and on the technology. So you can monitor these things so you'll know after 2 weeks if you're on budget and if you're on time. You don't have to wait till the end of the project to find out. And if you do that, you're not a very good project manager. The thing is, you need to be on top of what's going on all the time. Okay, that'll end us now for this, and we'll go on in a little bit.